Hi, I'm Ross from Airsoft, and today we're going to take a look at the Umarex HK416 A5 Mod 1. The H&K 416 is a replica that Elite Force and Umarex have been manufacturing for a decent amount of time now, and this is the newest rendition of that rifle. The 416 A5 Mod 1 in collaboration with Arcturus with their C.A.T split gearbox inside, as well as some other nice upgrades that we will get into throughout this review. But to start, let's talk about the externals of this beautiful build. So to begin, the most obvious thing on here is going to be your trademarks. This entire rifle is trademarked by H&K. They have all of the licensing for it. So you get the H&K branding on the rail, on the lower receiver, on the upper receiver. All of those parts are going to be made out of heavy duty metal, and they are going to have a weather resistant powder coat finish on top as well to keep this guy nice and pristine in any weather and environment. So to go tip the butt on this rifle, we have our flash hider up here. You're going to get an orange plastic one out of the box. It is glued on, and they have a set screw position in there, but no set screw installed. So just heat it up and give it a twist. I recommend going forward first and then back to loosen up that glue. Get it out of there, clean up those threads, and then you have 14mm counterclockwise threads at the end of your barrel, much like most Airsoft replicas. So you can add on any attachment you would like to the end of your 416 A5 Mod 1 here. Coming down a little bit further, we have the gas block. It has the markings for suppressed and normal. That would be in the German language, as H&K is a German company. However, it does still match with English, suppressed and normal. In a real 416, you would switch your gas block depending on if you are running it suppressed or not to allow for the gas cycling to be proper. On this, it is purely cosmetic. However, it does rotate left to right, so that's pretty cool. We have our flip up front sight as well as our flip up rear sight here. They are H&K trademarked. Their rear sight has a very cool quick release system, allowing you to just push on the back here and take the sight right off or put it right back on. The front one does use a Allen key to attach. And those are both seated on our monolithic Picatinny rail that goes across the top of the rifle. Now your front handguard here has a lot of M-Lok attachments. You have it on both of your 90-degree points as well as your bottom and then that top Picatinny. You do not have slots on your 45 degrees. They are not cut to mil-spec length, so you would have to get a canted if you wanted to mount anything in between there. Moving down a little further, we have our ambidextrous QD release point for your sling. So on either side of this, you could add in a QD release, and you can mount a sling depending on if you're left-handed or right-handed or however you want your sling set up. You do have that option here. And then up here on the handguard, we have a quick release as well. That is to allow you to remove your handguard a bit faster than a traditional barrel lug nut. So that is just a cool feature that they have added onto this replica that you can see reflected in the real variants as well. We already addressed the trademarks, but inside the receiver here, we have both ambidextrous mag release, selector switch, and bolt release. So you can release your bolt from either side, release your magazine from either side, and switch your fire position from either side. Your bolt release does work. We have this flared charging handle, which if you pull it back, opens your hop up and locks it into the back position, allowing you to make any changes to your hop up. And then hitting that bolt release will slide it back forward. You'll still have to close the actual dust cover window, but it will keep your gearbox shut and secure in there regardless if you just close your bolt catch. So that is a cool feature on this rifle here. And then we do have this nice thick ergonomic grip, which is to par with most of the 416s you've seen in the past, as well as their slim line stock. And we're gonna talk about some of my gripes specifically with this stock system in a little bit later in the video during the pros and cons, so stick around for that. But I will say that this is where your battery is gonna go, into the buffer tube back here, and we'll talk about that as well. And then last but not least with the externals is your magazine. This is an H&K Gen 3 PM mag, which is branded by H&K. You have all of their trademarks on there. This is accurate to the real version that they would run, and it is a pretty cool accessory to have with this rifle. So now to talk about the internals, I will start with the back where we were just talking about the battery. So your battery is going to go into your buffer tube here. So you're going to want a buffer tube style battery. They recommend an 11-1 with this guy. That's what we tested it with, and it performed very, very well. We were very happy with the shooting test that we got. The range was very accurate, and group groupings were very nice. Our FPS on this guy with that 11.1 battery and 3 2-gram BBs was between 1.3 to 1.4 joules. So just keep in mind that's where you're shooting at. This rifle is definitely set up for more of an outdoor field. I will talk about my main gripes with the battery, which isn't even necessarily the space, but more so the stock itself and the battery compartment in the pros and cons. So you can kind of hear about my thoughts on that. However, I will say that the battery space in here actually was plenty enough room for what I needed to fit in there. I was pretty pleased with being able to get the first battery I grabbed off the shelf that I kind of eyed up and thought would fit, did fit, which is something that unfortunately is not all too common in Airsoft. So something to keep in mind is just you would need a longer LiPo style battery to fit into your buffer tube back here. It does come included in the box a Deans to Tamiya adapter, so if you want to use a Tamiya battery for whatever reason, you could still do that. The adapter is included. However, I do recommend running Deans, especially on a beautiful rifle like this. Your trigger response will thank you. So to talk about what's actually going on inside this guy, because as I said, this is a collaboration with Arcturus. So we have the C.A.T split gearbox in here. It is a version 2 gearbox. It is a bit different than your standard gearbox as it's a split one. So what you can do is you can pop your receiver pins and you can split your gearbox and actually take a look directly inside of the rifle. So it is a bit of a different setup than your traditional V2 rifle, but the split gearbox is something that I think has its pros and cons in its own way. So this guy is the Arc FE ETU pre-installed in it already, and that is going to give you a lot of different adjustments with your trigger pulls as well as your fire selector. So you can go through and you can change all of your fire selector settings for different burst modes, different full auto settings, as well as where your trigger break is. So you can set it for the start of the pull, the middle of the pull, or the end of the pull. You can also set your break percentage reset, so that is how far your travel must go forward before it resets, allowing you to pull another shot. So you can do it to a more realistic, more longer pull, or to a much shorter pull. So there's a lot of customization you can get with your ETU inside of this guy. It also has other features like active braking and everything that you want to see in an ETU. So you're not missing anything with the electronics in this guy, and there is a lot of tunability that you can do to this rifle to get it to perform to your standards and how you want to see your rifle perform out on the field. And honestly, at the end of the day, that is what I want out of an airsoft gun. Something that allows me to tune it and really customize it to what I need it for, and is not just a one-stop fixes-all rifle. So as I said, when you pull back your charging handle, you will reveal your hop. It is a standard V2 rotary style hop up. It is nothing too special in there. And then you have your 279 millimeter inner barrel in this guy as well. So that's kind of the overview of your externals. You have your battery in the back. You have the Arcturus C.A.T split gearbox with your Arc FE ETU installed, and then you have your hop up and barrel. And overall, it is a relatively simple design and build that works pretty well. I've kind of come back around to being able to plug a battery in, go out on a field, and really let something zip without much modification out of the box. And I feel like this checks those boxes. If you're looking for a rifle that you can go run at the field and not have to put a lot of work into and still perform at a high level, I think that this is a very valid option to look at. I've been very impressed with it, but that is not to say that I don't have my gripes. So I'm gonna real quick talk about the cons that I've had with this rifle. There's a couple, and it's not really a big issue, but when I look at more of a premium rifle like this, I really like to consider these things in my purchase. So the first is gonna be this stock back here. As we talked about, there is a little tab, and in the instruction manual, it says to pull the tab forward and then slide the stock off to reveal your battery back there, which would be great. However, there is a roll pin installed in the bottom of the stock, and it is installed in a way that does not allow that tab to actually move. This piece is locked in here as long as that roll pin is in. So you would need to remove the roll pin to then remove your back stock piece as instructed in their user manual. In their user manual, they never really address the roll pin, so I'm not too sure if that's meant to come out as soon as you get the rifle and stay out, or if you are supposed to pop that in and out every time you want to do your battery. I'll say that personally, I found just removing the stock entirely by pulling the bottom tab here all the way down and then yoinking it was the best way for me to get to it. However, I understand that depending on how wire placement is and stuff, things can get tangled and you can potentially damage things back there by doing that. So just be careful with your stock and battery placement. I will say as well that the Dean's wire goes about to the length of the buffer tube. It doesn't really go much past it. So you don't have a lot of room to work with wire management and getting things plugged in. So I imagine with gloves and stuff like that, it's gonna be a bit harder to switch out your battery on this rifle. That was really my main complaint. The second thing I have to say that I wasn't the biggest fan of is unfortunately with the Arc FE ETU. Since it is a sensor trigger board, you don't have a micro switch or any break point on the trigger. So even in safety, this trigger moves all the way back as if it was in semi-auto, which if we switch it to semi, you'll see the trigger moves just the same, no resistance. So although you have all of those features and functions to change your braking distance and the amount of reset on your trigger, you don't actually have a wall that your trigger is hitting. Personally, I like my triggers to have a little bit more of a pull and a feel behind it. I like the Perun clicker system and things of that nature. I understand that that's not an issue for everybody, but I just felt it was something to mention because it's something I immediately noticed when I picked up the rifle and messed around with it in my hands. And the last and final thing I'll say, and this isn't unique to the 416, but on an ambidextrous selector switch, when I hold it with my finger at a rest off of the trigger, it often rubs right into the groove of my finger. I often remove my ambidextrous selector switches for that. I don't often use them. So that is just a personal gripe of mine, but I did feel it was necessary because it was another one of those things that stood out to me when I held the rifle, as the 416 selector switches are a bit more protruded than a typical M4 replica. Don't let my little list of cons get you down though, because this rifle is really, really nice. We were really impressed with the performance, and the little issues I kind of pointed out are just small gripes that I have and not really much of a performance issue with the rifle. Out of the box, you're gonna be able to get a very good performing outdoor gun that really doesn't require a lot of work to it. I would love to hear what you guys think about the 416 A5 Mod1. It is a pretty cool rifle that I think is going in a good direction. I'm curious to see what Elite Force and Umarex does with Arcturus in the future, and I am always excited to see new HK licensed rifles come into the shop. So let me know what you guys think of this rifle, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.